The words "you have cancer" split your life in two. There is before and there's after. Even if you beat cancer, your life is never going to go back to the way it was before. It changes everything irreversibly. Hi, my name's Jeannie. If you're new, welcome to my channel. I had back pain for many years and it had gotten a lot worse. But it was only when I broke my back spontaneously that I realized something was very wrong. When I say spontaneously, I mean I didn't fall and break my back. I didn't get in an accident and break my back. My back just broke. Still, as an otherwise healthy, slightly overweight, 51-year-old woman, I didn't expect it to be cancer. Who gets cancer at 51? That's something that happens to old people, right? But most cancers don't announce themselves overnight. The symptoms develop slowly. Shortness of breath, fatigue, bloating, those kind of things that could easily be explained by something else. We minimize the symptoms because the alternative, that we have a life-threatening disease, feels too much to contemplate. And so we look away. Our mind filters it down to what feels more manageable. It's stress. It's probably nothing. I'm too young. We compare ourselves to what we see as a stereotypical cancer patient. Family history, smoker, older. And if we don't match up with that image, we play those symptoms down. At the core, we want to feel that we have at least some degree of control. And so until the evidence is absolutely undeniable, our mind works overtime to maintain this illusion of order. I'm just under pressure at work. Maybe it's my thyroid. It's probably just allergies. It's probably nothing. And then you find out that it's not nothing. And in fact, it's just about to become everything. When I broke my back, the ambulance took me to a hospital that turned out to be a complete circus. I had to lie there waiting for an ER bed for 2 hours. For some reason, fentanyl doesn't have an effect on me. And the EMT was giving me morphine, but there came a point where he couldn't give me any more. And that was not pleasant. Once I was in the ER, I was lying next to a gentleman who was making a sound they call the death rattle. It's when your body shuts down just before you die. And it is the most unsettling, creepy, horrible sound that you can imagine. The ER doctor told me that one of my vertebrae was broken. Turns out there were actually two. The radiologist must have missed the second one. He also said that I had hypercalcemia. That means extremely high calcium levels, which is dangerous. So they admitted me. And I spent a week in hospital. It was a fiasco, but in some ways it made the news of my diagnosis a little bit easier to handle because it happened slowly. The hospitalist had zero people skills. I have a better than average understanding of physiology simply because I studied it at university, but I couldn't make head or tail of what he was saying. And one of the doctors that came in to see me, a neurologist, I mentioned that to him and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. We don't always understand him." After a few days of scans and tests, the hospitalist told me that he wanted to see if there were any other lesions. Lesions to me says cancer. Technically, it actually doesn't. There are some lesions that are not malignant, but for the most part, that's what it means. So when I went into the scan, I asked the tech, "Are you looking for cancer?" And he said yes. But when I spoke to the hospitalist afterwards, and I said something about cancer, he said to me, clearly irritated, "I didn't say anything about cancer. I don't know where you got that information from." And so I was confused, to put it mildly. About 2 days later, when the original hospitalist had changed shifts with a new hospitalist, I overheard two of the nurses, they were doing a handoff between their shifts. And the one nurse pointed at the computer and said, he wants to tell her that himself. And the other nurse said, oh, you mean the myeloma? And so I whipped out my phone and looked up what it was. I had heard of myeloma, but I really didn't have any grasp of how it worked or what it was or anything. At that point, the second hospitalist said, yeah, we think it's probably cancer. I'm going to get the oncologist come in and review your case. That was the point at which fear rushed in like floodwater. I don't have to tell you what that feeling is like, the kind of fear when you first hear those words. Your brain goes blank and races at the same time. You lack the information to answer the questions that are rolling around in your head. How bad is it? What stage am I at? How long do I have? Is it going to hurt? Am I going to lose my hair? I was very lucky in that the hospital oncologist was a very kind, very thorough, a very nice elderly man who was getting ready to retire. And he did a very thorough examination and then sat down quietly next to me and said, has anybody spoken to you about multiple myeloma? And he explained the disease to me. It is a blood cancer. It is currently incurable. He couldn't tell me things like what stage or how bad, because we would need to get test results for that. But he did give me a good grasp of how the disease works. He said to me, do not wait around on this. I explained to him that I wanted to change hospital groups. When you have one of the best cancer hospitals in the world 10 minutes away from your house, you'd be silly not to. But I could only get an appointment about 4 or 5 weeks away. And so I phoned up the hospital oncologist and told him that. And bless his heart, he picked up the phone and phoned the head of department at the second hospital and asked her to please fit me in. And she did. And I was seen within a week. Since then, I have heard from so many people who've had to wait for weeks, sometimes months, to get their first appointment with an oncologist. Cancer waits for no one. That wait might shave weeks, even months, off their life. And I can't even imagine how scary that is. 1 week was bad enough. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I can't imagine. You find yourself grasping for straws, at least I did. My first appointment with my oncologist, I said to her, my sister knows someone at her church who had myeloma and has been declared cured. And she said to me, I won't use that word at this point because it just isn't true. Myeloma will come back at some point. My first question was about staging. Now, multiple myeloma only has 3 stages. Metastasis, which is usually stage 4, is impossible because it's in your blood, it's all over your body already. They took blood and ran a DNA test, and it came back showing 3 mutations, which put me in the 3rd stage, stage 3. I haven't looked at the stats, but I know they're not good. But that said, I do believe that your mental attitude plays some role in your disease progression. That may not be 100% scientific, but people beat the odds all the time. They do. And honestly, I am going to do my best to be one of those people. Once you get over the shock from that diagnosis, you're often left feeling helpless. But there are things you can do to make you feel like you have a little bit of control. Whenever I see my oncologist or my nurse practitioner, I ask them if I can record the appointments so that I can go back at a later time and check things when you are newly diagnosed, or even now. Your brain does not retain information like it used to. That's been my experience anyway. For me, the more I understand, the less power fear has over me. I don't look at things like survival rates or what it's like to die of myeloma. I don't need to live that twice. But I have armed myself with the facts. I have learned how my cancer works and how treatment works. And most blood tests, most tests that come back, I can understand to a degree. Other people don't want to know. They just want to be told what to do, and that's fine. Information seeking and information avoidance are both valid coping mechanisms. Unfortunately, fear doesn't just happen to you. It happens to the people who love you too. The people that love you, they don't know how to cope with cancer any more than you do. They feel helpless. The only thing you can do is tell them how to help you. I've said to my husband many times, you can't fix this any more than I can. What I need from you is to just listen. And when I'm scared, just lie next to me and be with me. Don't try and cheer me up. Sometimes I just need a good cry. After diagnosis comes treatment. In my case, I was really fearful that my back was not going to heal. And in fact, it didn't. After 3 months in a back brace, I had to have back surgery. I don't think there was any real danger of my spinal cord being broken or affected, but it's still scary when you have medical grade concrete injected into your spine. It's scary. For the 4 months after diagnosis, I had to have chemo. I responded extremely well. In fact, I remember the lab once or twice having to go back and they redid the test because the result was too good to be true. There must be a mistake. There wasn't a mistake. Nevertheless, I was worried that I would not qualify for a stem cell transplant. Certain markers have to improve by 90% before they'll do one. 89%, they won't do it. 90%, they will. It's a line in the sand. I also worried that the chemo would give me secondary cancer, and that remains a fear of mine. And that's the paradox of using poison to sustain life. Next came the stem cell transplant. My cancer center does it on an outpatient basis. They believe that the less time you spend in hospital, the less chance you have of getting infected. Other hospital groups don't. My sister flew in from Australia for 5 months to help us, and honestly, I don't know how we would have done it without her. John calls her a saint, and he's not being sarcastic at all. She truly is one of the finest human beings on the planet, and I am so lucky to have her as my sister. Sorry. You undergo 2 very powerful rounds of chemo, and that is when your hair falls out. In my case, I had had a buzz cut, and so when my hair fell out, it was a lot less dramatic. I remember when my mum had non-Hodgkin lymphoma, I was helping her brush her hair and it was coming out in chunks, and she was completely traumatized. They make a very big deal about what you can and can't do. For example, when you're driving in the car from the hospital to home or vice versa, you circulate the same air in the car because you don't want to be sucking in toxins that could harm you. You can't go near broken ground because there are microbes that could take you out. I would go to pick up the dog's bone and suddenly realize, I can't touch that. It was pretty hectic. It's because your immune system is non-existent, not compromised. It is non-existent, and anything can take you out. I don't even remember feeling fearful at that point. I just did whatever was next in front of me. Whatever was on that day's schedule is what I did. And so we would go into the hospital for about 4 hours, pretty much every day for 6 weeks, maybe more. I've blocked some of that stuff out, I truly have. And during those 4 hours, they would check your platelets, check your white blood cells, and treat any symptoms that you have from the treatment. Besides fatigue, besides weakness, the symptom that was worse for me was nausea. And unfortunately, because of another medication that I'm on for an unrelated illness, I can't take what most people do to combat nausea. And so I just lay there feeling like death warmed up for weeks. And ultimately, I lost almost 30 pounds. That's a lot of weight. So I graduated from my stem cell transplant on June 19th, 2024. It's a long story as to why, but essentially they weren't able to tell me if I was in full remission or not. So I had to have 2 months of what they call consolidation chemo. Today I'm on maintenance chemo. I have 1 jab a month and I take poison pills every day. And that is what keeps my multiple myeloma inactive. I have blood tests done every month and I cannot help myself. I have to scrutinize them. And there is one that is particularly important. And so when my phone pings, my chart says you've got mail or you've got test results, my body just floods with adrenaline. My heart just sinks. If you have cancer, you know exactly what I mean. The fear that is associated with getting test results is unlike any other kind of fear. It's about waiting for the other shoe to drop. It does not matter how good you feel. Just one bad test result and it takes you back to where you were when you first got diagnosed. And if you are one of the unlucky ones and your cancer has come back or you're not responding to treatment, the fear is, once again, raw. Questions you had when you were first diagnosed rear their head again. How long do I have? Is this going to hurt? What comes after? The truth is, the fear may never go away entirely. In fact, it probably will never go away entirely. But it can quiet down when you say to yourself, not every ache is the beginning of the end. One bad test result does not define the rest of your life. The aim has to be changing fear into awareness. And I have been able to do that to a certain degree, but it did not happen overnight, and it certainly isn't easy. Over time, you learn how to live between scans, to be alive while you wait. It's about sitting quietly and recognizing that fear and acceptance can coexist. It's also important to stay connected to the people who are helping you through this journey, because isolation feeds fear. Community and connection weaken fear. That's what I've found since I started this channel. I've had a number of people reach out and say, it helps to just listen to somebody else who's facing the same challenges, someone who knows how they feel. They feel less alone, and that in turn helps me. And maybe one day the same thing will happen with you. I don't mean starting a YouTube channel, but maybe one day when someone says, I'm scared, you'll realize that everything that you have experienced to date, all the fear, all the anger, all the grief, those things have equipped you to be the kind of person who says, I know, I understand, me too. You are not alone, but you will get through this. That is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me on this journey. please like, subscribe, or leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one.